Hello everyone and welcome. I think I have sound now. If you're joining me live on either YouTube or in the Sidereal Insights Astrology Facebook group, please let me know if you can hear me and see me okay. I feel really rusty on this because I haven't done a broadcast for y'all since the 2nd of August, since the full moon in Capricorn. I don't know how many of you remember that or watched that broadcast, but it's been a while and I'm glad to be back. So give me just one moment to kind of orient myself on all my screens, make sure I have my notes, make sure I have all the streams working in all the right places. I will need to kind of juggle between multiple tabs and screens to keep an eye on comments tonight. So I apologize for that. Okay. Looks a little choppy on YouTube. Sorry about that. Looks okay, maybe also a little choppy on Facebook. I don't like that. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start recording. And hopefully with the recording then we'll have a backup video just in case things don't go so well. Okay, so hold on, let me take a look at my recording settings. Sorry y'all, normally I have this stuff done beforehand, but I was kind of like feeling out of practice. Okay, so looks like we're okay. Looks like we're okay. All right, thank you all for joining me. Thank you for joining me live. Thank you for watching the replay. Thank you to the returning viewers. Thank you to new viewers who might just be joining us either in the Sidereal Insights Astrology Facebook group on YouTube, or on Facebook. It's a Facebook group. Of course it's on Facebook. Or if you're just joining us from YouTube. So tonight we're exploring the new moon, right? But it's going to be the new moon in Leo. And that might be a little disorienting for some of you, because a lot of the chatter from astrological circles online about this new moon is referencing the new moon in Virgo. Now, this is kind of highlighting one of the fundamental differences between sidereal astrology and tropical astrology, but even some of the nuanced differences amongst the different sidereal zodiacs or ayanamsha that we can use. And so what I want to do is kind of talk a little bit about that. In the first part of the broadcast, we're also going to talk about the astrology of this new moon viewed through that nuanced lens, and how that can affect how we read a chart, basically. So we'll talk a little bit more about the astrology of this particular new moon being in Leo and not in Virgo, although if you use a tropical zodiac in other ways in your astrological practice, or if you use Lahiri Ayanamsha, if you practice Vedic astrology, that's fine too. Just as we go through this practice, try not to mix those two systems in with what we're doing tonight. So tonight is going to be super, super, super important that you're using a sidereal natal chart based on the Fagan-Bradley zodiac. And if you don't have a natal chart based on that zodiac, I do have a link. It reconnects. Okay, good. We're back on Facebook. Awesome. Okay. I need more bandwidth, apparently. Okay, so you'll want your sidereal natal chart based on the Fagan-Bradley zodiac, and you can get that for free at that link, or if you've watched any of my past videos, I've done a video on how you can get one through astro.com using their extended chart settings. And I apologize, the video quality on that isn't very good. It does have subtitles. Well, it's really actually the audio quality that's not very good, but I added subtitles to that so that it would be a little bit easier to watch. So tonight, like I was saying in the first part of the broadcast, we're going to talk more about the astrology of this particular new moon and how we can look at it through the lens of being ruled by the sun and not by Mercury, which is how we would approach it if we were looking at it from the perspective of it being a new moon in Virgo. And then what we'll do in the second part of the broadcast, just like normal, we'll run through each of the houses this is falling into for you according to your sidereal rising sign. For those of you who are watching live, or if you're catching the replay and you need that, we'll do a quick rundown on that. And then in the third part, we'll go over some prompts for setting intentions tonight with this new moon. And I kind of updated them this go around to factor in the astrology of the current transits into our approach with the intention setting. So this is going to be a little bit fresh and new. It's going to make you think a little bit. It's not going to be quite as light and fun as some of the past new moons in Leo that we've had. And the reason for that is because viewed through the lens of a new moon in Leo, this is kind of a challenging new moon. Okay. So let's dive right in. I'm going to just take a peek and see if we have anyone joining us in the comments before I jump in to all of this. So we're going to look at the new moon through the lens of Western sidereal astrology. And really the idea is to give you guidance on how you can consciously use the energy of the new moon to affect your life in a positive way. Basically, the idea behind how I practice astrology is to help teach you how to respond to your transits rather than react to them. If you can look ahead and see what's coming and anticipate, you can craft a strategy and a plan for how to navigate, right? It's kind of like if you are on a boat, on a river, a kayak on a river, right? You scope out the terrain ahead of time. You make a plan. You have a strategy for how you're going to navigate different parts of a river, its rapids, its falls, things like that, right? So looking ahead, you can know, you can prepare, rather than just getting in a kayak or a canoe and letting it carry you ahead and not know and have to deal with those challenges as they arise. This gives you the opportunity to kind of be a little bit more strategic and a little bit more aware in how you navigate the ebbs and flows and tides of life, basically. And so tonight, what I'm going to kind of do is guide you through reconnecting to your unconscious desires, needs, things like that, looking at where you may need to address foundational changes in your life in order to accommodate those desires, those needs, especially where they relate to spiritual or professional aspirations, and setting intentions for the coming 6-month in Leo cycle. And so this particular new moon in Leo, it's the second new moon in Leo of the year. And that is where we differ in our approach from both a tropical perspective and a Lahiri or Vedic perspective. The reason for that is the Fagan Bradley Ayanamsha is about 25 degrees 5 minutes different from the tropical. The tropical is about 25 degrees 5 minutes progressed from the sidereal zodiac, which reflects where the planets actually are in the sky relative to the stars of the constellations, which just don't move from our perspective here on Earth. It's about 52, 53 minutes of arc is all, less than a degree different from the Lahiri Ayanamsha commonly used in Vedic astrology. But that difference is really pronounced tonight with this new moon because using the Fagan zodiac, we calculate the new moon to be occurring at 29 degrees 59 minutes of Leo. So right at the tail end of Leo, the very last degree and the very last minute before it moves basically within the same day, the same 24-hour period into Virgo. Okay. So this is the last new moon of Leo in the year. And it's kind of an opportunity to rethink our approach to some things. The September 17th new moon is kind of fraught with challenges, but there's some opportunity in this new moon and the astrology of it. And that opportunity really requires faith. It requires a willingness to act in pursuit of our ambitions and in pursuit of our aspirations. And we're going to be talking a little bit about what drives us our unconscious desires, our unconscious needs for attention, for validation, and especially how those unconscious needs and unconscious desires can seek to find expression in our lives even if we never make them conscious. This is something that Jung spent a lot of time with in his practice. Okay. Let's see. Are we back with Facebook? Facebook says we're connecting. Okay, looks like we're back. And we're coming back on YouTube. Okay, good. So somehow the streaming software disconnected the live stream. I'll have to keep an eye on that. So I don't know how much of what I just went over didn't stream because I didn't notice when that said that it was having trouble with the video. However, I do have a backup recording, so hopefully, if necessary, we can work from the backup recording. Okay. So to recap a little bit about this new moon, I want to dig into it deeper. So I'm going to just kind of like back up a paragraph or two in my notes and cover what I already went over just in case there was some trouble with the stream. So the new moon in Leo, this is the second new moon in Leo of the year. And I talked a little bit already about why that's the case when we're looking at it from a Fagan Bradley perspective. But when we're looking at it through the lens of being a new moon in Leo, the sun is the ruler. And this particular new moon then becomes fraught with challenges. There's opportunity in it, though, as well. It requires faith, this new moon, and a willingness to act in pursuit of our ambitions and aspirations. And I would dare say maybe even a leap of faith. Okay? So keep that in mind as you decide what you want to set intentions around and what intentions you want to set. Oh, I'm going to make things crash on my desk, and I apologize for that. This new moon is really, because it's taking place in Leo and Leo's occupying the 12th house in the chart, it's really about our unconscious needs and desires for attention and validation and self-expression, and how those unconscious needs and desires drive us and drive our behavior, drive our choices, drive our actions. And sometimes what we experience is that what remains unconscious is expressed outwardly in that same unconscious manner. And while those unconscious motivations for our behavior might be unrecognized to us because we haven't shown the light on what's unconscious, others might be able to see quite clearly what those unconscious motivations are by observing us. Okay, so we really kind of hamstring ourselves in that sense when we do not make the unconscious conscious. We might be in a position where we're actually giving other people more information through our behavior and our actions about what motivates us than what we have access to ourselves. And that's not a good or strong or sound position to be in. Okay. This is a new moon from the astrology of it that suggests that changing foundations of our lives and that the transformation of the underlying structures of our lives will be the basis for all of our future potential, all of our future achievements professionally, also spiritually. Okay, and that these transformations are affecting us in the privacy of our own homes most of all. They're felt personally by all of us, yet differently by all of us. And those effects are largely hidden from the public view because we're experiencing them within the confines of the building within which we live, right? Or within the family structure. Or the family dynamic, and all of that plays out behind the closed front door and the four walls of our homes, right? And so, of course, the color and the flavor of this type of transformation, this type of structural change or foundational transformation will vary for each of us according to our own circumstances as individuals, according to how the new moon touches off in our own charts. And I would encourage you have a look at, 29-59 degrees, the very tail end point of any sign in your chart, and look to see if you have a planet or point there that might be affected by this particular new moon. I think it's really safe to say that the new work and employment dynamic, the new home and family and living dynamics that we're all experiencing just through living through a novel pandemic has brought changes. And then we're each of us facing major changes to how we experience home life, how we experience family life. And that it's become increasingly clear the longer that this goes on, that some of our old ways of conducting home and family life just no longer serve us. And you may find that you need to make a break from what you've been doing. Okay, so this new moon in Leo highlights where home and family life is at odds with our career and professional lives, and even with our spiritual growth and development in some cases. So we may experience difficulty around accessing needed resources right now, especially where we need another's help to receive them. Any type of resources that might come to you through other people in your lives that are not your own, you may have difficulty tapping into them, accessing them, gaining use of them for any number of reasons. Okay. But that's likely to be a common experience for many, many of us, where there's just not another avenue of resources available to us in a time when we might heavily need access to additional resources beyond what we bring to the table ourselves. With this new moon, it occurs opposite Neptune. And the new moon and Neptune both square the North Node and the transiting midheaven. What that says to me is that we may learn secrets that have a direct bearing on those goals and aspirations that we have for our career, for our professional life, even for our own spiritual growth and development. And that there's a potential for disillusionment or disappointment coupled with this new moon, especially with regard to the uncertainty that we all feel around our careers and professional lives. Because for many of us, careers and professional lives are changing, either the nature of the work that we do or the type of the work that we do, or whether we're even being called to do work at all if we're not considered essential workers, right? So we might feel cut off from things, not only from resources, but we might feel cut off from our creativity. We might feel cut off from our experience of pleasure, of joy, of love. We might feel cut off from our religious life, our church community, especially if we rely heavily on that. And we may be experiencing struggles with children right now. Now, where we have some opportunity, where we can leverage some avenues for allowing things to shift and to make space and room to maneuver in this current dynamic, I want to call out one key tool: communication. Communication is going to be absolutely key to navigating this new moon. Mental clarity, communication, use communication to heal. I'm talking about journaling. I'm talking about blogging. I'm talking about writing things out, brain dumping on paper, reaching out to someone special, someone you trust, someone you love, and get everything off your chest. Write it out, talk it out for clarity. Okay? There's really a potential for transformational dialogue to take place right now, which directly affects the family or the relationship with a parent or parents, or which affects the residential status in some way, okay, or residential circumstances even, okay? So that's kind of what I have to say about this particular new moon. I don't dislike it. I don't like it. It's not super exciting. It's not super fun. It's got a lot of challenges built into it. It screams about the need for change, and how in the process of creating change in our lives, positive change, we need to make the unconscious conscious. We need to shine a light on it because it's on the verge of coming into our conscious experience anyway. And it will find expression whether we make it conscious or not. But making the unconscious conscious can open avenues for finding healthy expression, positive change, and not just doing the same old that we've been doing. Because when we get stuck in a rut, when we're offered an opportunity for change and we pass it up and we decide to return to the same old, same old, same old because that's what we know and that's what we're comfortable with, and because we're fearful of the uncertainty that might lie on the other side of that change, we really just hamstring ourselves. We hamstring fulfilling our potential in spiritual ways and in real life ways. Okay? And so I want to encourage you to do some deep digging tonight. Don't be afraid to spend some time with this. And don't be afraid to take whatever thoughts come up with tonight's intention setting and bounce them off of a trusted advisor in the next couple of days, just for some good, honest feedback that might help you have insight into your own blind spots, if that makes sense. I hope it does. And it looks like we're still streaming, so everything's good. I'm going to keep going. So part two, we talk about which house this is falling into for each of you according to your sidereal rising sign and what the themes of that house are. And so I'm going to blast through this really, really quickly so that we can move on to the actual intention setting and the prompts that we're going to be digging into as we set intentions with this particular new moon. But before I do that, I want to jump over to the Facebook tab and see if we have any comments from live viewers, and check the YouTube stream for comments from live viewers before I dive in. Looks good. Looks good. So starting with Aries, this is a 5th house new moon for you, of course, which has to do with creativity, it has to do with children, it has to do with love and romance, right? Has to do with the things that we do for pleasure and for fun and enjoyment. It's not about marriage. That's partnership and commitment. That has to do with Venus and Libra and the 7th house, right? The 5th house is the natural house of Leo. And Leo rules the heart, right? Things that we love, things that we do for enjoyment, joy, pleasure. That also in the 5th house includes things like sports. It includes things like risk-taking and gambling, those sorts of things, okay? In Taurus rising, though, we experience this as a 4th house new moon. And so 4th house has to do with home and property. It has to do with family. It has to do with parents. It has to do with the later life. It has to do with your living circumstances, your residence, right? So it includes real estate and real estate buying and selling. If you have Gemini rising, this is a 3rd house new moon. So that has to do with travel and transportation and communication, especially local travel, short distance transportation and communication that takes place in your immediate community and immediate environment. Communication that happens local to you. It also relates to your siblings, your neighbors, your extended family, things like aunts, uncles, cousins. Not your parents, not your grandparents, not your kids. Okay. Cancer, if you have Cancer rising, this will be a 2nd house new moon for you. And so what I like about when we have a 2nd house new moon is that it's an opportunity to boost our income. And that's really what I would encourage you to do as an approach if you have Cancer rising, because when you take those steps during a new moon in your 2nd house, you can see the payoff in about 6 months when we have the full moon in that same sign. And so for Cancer, 2nd house, of course, has to do with earned income. It has to do with expenses. It has to do with wealth and possessions. It has to do with movable assets. So money that you can take from one deposit institution to another, mattress money, your possessions, things that you have inside your own home, not the home itself. That falls under the 4th house as real estate, right? It's not a movable asset. But the 2nd house also has to do with money that we earn from the work that we do and our expenses. Okay. Leo, this is of course a 1st house new moon. That's a birthday new moon for you if you have Leo rising. And what's exciting about that is that a birthday new moon is kind of a wild card new moon. You get the opportunity to use it in any way that you want to. So I'm going to go through what the 1st house themes are for you if you have Leo rising, and you can choose to use this in that way. However, if there's another way that you feel called or led to experience this new moon or to set intentions for this new moon, please, I would encourage you to do that because it's your birthday. right? So the first house, it has to do with appearance. It has to do with self-expression, our behavior, our mannerisms, how we show up in the world, and the role that we play in the world. It has to do a little bit with identity. It has to do with self-expression, if I didn't already say that, and our personality, okay? So when you have a new moon in the first house, it's almost like an opportunity to reinvent yourself in a way, or to give yourself, some kind of image makeover. And if that's you, if that's something that you are wanting to do and you have Leo rising, I would encourage you, especially hang tight, because coming up, which day is it? I was just seeing it and it wasn't on my radar of things to talk about. But coming up in the not too distant future, we have Venus making her ingress into Leo. When does that happen? Coming up on the 28th of September. So if you're Leo rising and you're thinking about making a change to your image or your appearance in some way, what I would encourage you to do is use this new moon to visualize that, get clear on what kind of image you want to create or craft for yourself. What does that look like? Set the intention, do your visualization, and then as you're ready to take those steps or make those changes, if you need to meet with a stylist or if you need to go shopping for new clothing or things like that, hold off until after the 28th? Hold off until just after the 28th, when Venus is moving through the sign of Leo, to make those changes, because then you'll have her support to making those changes as attractive and beneficial for you as possible. Okay. If you have Virgo rising, this will be a 12th house new moon for you. So it has to do with privacy and seclusion. It kind of resonates with this new moon in Leo, because the new moon in Leo is taking place in the 12th house of this chart. And so what you might choose to do if you have Virgo rising could very well resonate heavily with the astrology of the chart itself. The 12th house has to do with privacy and seclusion. It has to do with our spiritual life, our spiritual path, our spiritual growth and development. It has to do with our unconscious mind, our unconscious habits and beliefs. It has to do with our escapist tendencies, our addictions, things that we want to lose ourselves in order to escape reality, and the reality of our daily lives especially, right? So where you might be wanting to set a new moon intention as Virgo, we're kind of touch on some of that a little bit in the prompts. Video viewers are going to experience buffering, is what YouTube says. I have a message here. We're still live. All right, everything's copacetic, as my dad would have said before he passed away. Excuse me. I burnt some incense. I'm back in my office. I haven't been in my office working for about 2 months. And that's partly why you haven't seen me very much. To be quite frank, friends, I love the new moon live streams and the full moon live streams because they're a little bit more intimate, they're a little bit more personal, and we have somewhat of an opportunity to kind of be a little more vulnerable with each other. And to be quite frank with you, the last couple of months have been a bit of a struggle for me. Partly because I'm adjusting to this new life of having housemates in my house, and that's been a little bit of a challenge, especially in the last 2 months. There's been some disruption and a lot of changes taking place behind the scenes for me. I kind of feel like this chart resonates in that sense for this new moon, but also because, and I don't know how many of you might know this, I came down with COVID earlier in the year. I got sick with COVID in March and was sick through the end of April. I don't know. I don't want to describe it as bad. I wasn't anywhere near needing like hospitalized, but I'm what you might consider one of the COVID long haulers. So I just had symptoms for forever. And I've been having a little bit of recurrence of some of the symptoms lately, and that has been throwing me for a loop. And one of those symptoms is called COVID brain. Brain fog, difficulty with memory, difficulty with focus, difficulty with executive function. And so that has been playing into some of the dynamic in my life lately, which is a little bit part of why I've been AWOL. dealing with that, dealing with personal life within my own home, and just juggling the changing demands on my schedule. And there's actually going to be some more changes to my schedule in terms of increased demands coming up in the next couple of months. And so if you're in the Sidereal Insights Facebook group, you may have caught my post earlier today where I mentioned this. If not, I'll just touch on it real quick while you're all on live with me. I will be doing some short-term work that will take me out of the office in the next month and a half, potentially 2 months, probably more like a month and a half. But it's going to be a crazy demand on my time in the coming several weeks, which will make it, first of all, a lot more difficult for me to work with any of you one-on-one, because I'll have much more limited availability and much more limited time to offer you. However, I do want to keep the broadcasts going now that I have kind of moved back into the space of doing live broadcasts. So what I want to warn you about is to let you know that the Sidereal Insights Astro updates that we do every other Monday, haven't been doing those for a couple months either, and these live broadcasts here on YouTube and in the Sidereal Insights Facebook group, I might pre-record some of them just so that they still happen in the coming month and a half. So not all of them will necessarily be live if pre-recording is what it takes to make them happen. And especially with the Sidereal Insights Astro updates where we talk about the current and upcoming sidereal transits, those are very likely going to be pre-recorded because when I normally broadcast those, I will be busy out of the house elsewhere. The lunar live streams, those we usually do in the evenings, and I'm hoping that I'll still be able to do them live. But I just want to give you a heads up that some of the broadcasts going forward in the next short window of time may actually be pre-recorded and not live, which is not our normal mode. But just to kind of give you a warning on that. Now, getting back to houses and rising signs. If you have Libra rising, this is an 11th house new moon for you. So that has to do with friends, organizations, hopes and dreams, those sorts of things. When you have a new moon in the 11th house, it's a really great opportunity to take steps towards manifesting a long-held hope or dream of yours, or bringing it into your life experience. If you have Scorpio rising, this will be a 10th house new moon, which is related to career and achievement, which also, just like with Virgo, also kind of resonates with the astrology of this new moon because the North Node and the midheaven place such an emphasis on the 10th house, career achievement, but also with the midheaven, the emphasis also becomes on spiritual potential and developing to your highest spiritual potential as well. Okay, so the 10th house, career, awards, recognition, achievement, status and reputation, fame, these sorts of things. If you have Sagittarius rising, it'll be a 9th house new moon for you. So that's international affairs, travel, immigration, long distance travel, foreign travel, things like that. International communication, publishing and broadcasting, legal, higher education matters, that sort of stuff. Also has to do with religion, philosophy, and law. So legal things could be coming up for folks who have Sagittarius rising. For Capricorn, this is 8th house new moon. That has to do with other people's money. Okay. So if you have Capricorn rising, this new moon will be related to other people's resources that are at your disposal, investment earnings, financial plans, estate planning, insurance and taxes, inheritance, debt and debt management, bonus or commission income, those sorts of things. The 8th house also can relate to other themes like the occult, death, rebirth, transformation, psychology, research, investigation, anything that requires deep digging into mysteries, right? The Aquarius risers here are going to have a 7th house new moon. So that has to do with partnership and marriage, right? It has to do with business relationships as well. And our relationships with other people just in general. The 7th house also includes open enemies and rivals, so be aware of that. And when we're talking about the descendant as a point in the 7th house, it also speaks to what we reject about ourselves and what we tend to project onto other people. So 7th house lunations are a fantastic opportunity to do shadow work, okay? And I think this whole new moon speaks to Excuse me for the traffic. I had to open the door to my office so that I could enjoy the fresh night air. There's a little bit of traffic. So 7th house resonates with this particular, the astrology of this new moon being in the 12th house as an opportunity to do some of that shadow work, especially around unconscious beliefs and habits, unconscious motivations, desires, and needs, and how we act in order to get those filled. So definitely an opportunity, like I was saying, for shadow work if you have Aquarius rising. For Pisces rising, finally, the very end of the zodiac, Pisces rising, this is a 6th house new moon. So it has to do with work, health, pets, daily routines, schedules, habits, diet, lifestyle, things like that. So it's a good opportunity to establish a new health habit or to make a positive change to your diet. And by positive change with a new moon, what I mean is that's the time to be adding in healthy new foods to your diet. At the full moon, that's the time to be eliminating foods that aren't good for you. Okay, so add in healthy new habits at the new moon when you have a 6th house new moon, and let go of bad habits at the full moon when you have a 6th house full moon. Okay, did I say it has to do with pets and employees? Yeah, has to do with pets and employees too, if you have those. Let's talk about Leo. So part 2, that really kind of wraps it for going over the rising signs and which house this is falling into for each of you according to your sidereal rising sign. The third part of the broadcast, I want to focus more on Leo and Leo's archetype, Leo and his themes. Leo's fixed fire. Let's start there. Fixed fire. Steady, banked heat. Kind of like, I liken this to banked coals. Leo has a fixed nature. It's constant, it's steady. You could call it steadfast, you could call it loyal. Those are positive expressions of the fixed nature when we're talking about Leo and fixed heart, right? Fixed heart chakra. But that also means that Leo as an energy is very resistant to change. It takes a lot to motivate change in the part of our life ruled by Leo. It takes a lot to motivate change, potentially based on the condition of the sun in our chart. When we factor the sun's rulership of Leo and that house into how we interpret the chart. So these are important things to keep in mind because this is a new moon in Leo and it's very much underscoring the need for change. Big change, major change, transformational change, structural change, foundational change. This is about the underpinnings of everything. And this chart is screaming that there are things we all need to change. So just know that that change is going to be necessary. But because of the fixed nature of Leo, it's probably not going to be comfortable. Okay? It takes a lot to make a shift when we're talking about fixed energy. Okay. Now, Leo rules the heart. We talked about that a little bit in part 2 of the broadcast. Leo rules the heart. You've heard of the phrase the lion-hearted, right? Leo is ruled by the sun. And that's why, as the natural ruler of the 5th house, he also rules love and activities that we do for pleasure. This describes things like lifelong love affairs with people and with our hobbies, with things that give us pleasure, the activities that we're passionate about, the things that bring us joy, unbridled joy. Okay. Now, one thing I want to keep in mind and call your attention to is that unlike the rulers of other signs, the sun can never retrograde. The sun can never retrograde because it's our luminary, it's at the center of our solar system. So we can never experience a retrograde of the ruler of Leo. It is fixed fire, the sun. It might set every day, but it always rises, right? So When we're talking about Leo and its natural rulership of the 5th house, this is the archetype that we're talking about, is the archetype of the artist, the actor. You know, there's a little drama that goes with Leo, a little desire for attention and maybe even some recognition. It's the archetype of the king or the leader of the people. It's the archetype of the golden child. Leo desires recognition and desires and needs self-expression. Okay? Leo describes our creativity, our problem-solving abilities, our leadership capabilities, and our leadership style. And Leo also embodies the will. It represents the will, right? It's the heart. It's the solar and heart area, those chakras, right? So, Leo, in the area of your life governed by the house that Leo occupies in your sidereal natal chart. Now remember, this needs to be your Fagan natal chart. I want you to consider, and keeping in mind that this new moon is requiring of you faith, acts of faith, leaps of faith, and a willingness to act in pursuit of your highest ambitions and aspirations, both professional and spiritual. How can you reconnect with your... Oh, actually, before we start that... No, actually, I'll save this for later. I do have to read the new moon page in the moon gazing journal, but we'll go over the prompts first, and then I'll read that. How can you reconnect with your unconscious desires for attention and validation? How can you lead them out into the open for healthy expression? And what needs to change in your life for you to feel safe to do this? What creative risk can you take in the house that Leo falls in your sidereal natal chart, in your Fagan-Bradley natal chart? How can you be brave about taking a risk? How can you be brave about facing your unconscious desires, drives, needs, and motivations? And where do you need to step into your courage and take a leap of faith? What are you passionate about in private that you hesitate to bring out into the open? What is your will? And what I mean when I say that is, what experience do you want to create for yourself? Is there a physical thing that you want to create or give birth to? How will you step into leadership behind the scenes? How can you take the lead on private matters? How can you channel your creative urges and energies into solo projects during a time of social distancing? And what kind of attention do you want in your career and your professional life? What avenues can you explore for greater or more meaningful professional self-expression? So what I want you to do is set creative and inspired intentions around what it is you want to manifest or create for yourself in this area of life. In the next 6 months until we have our full moon in Leo. And so after you've spent some time thinking about what it is you want to create, what it is you want to manifest in this area of your life, what unconscious thing do you want to make conscious, what hidden thing do you want to bring to light in your life, spend several minutes visualizing what it is that you want and how you'd like to manifest it. What outcome do you most want? And with your pen and paper, I would encourage you, after you write out your intention, take some time to draw it out. My experience around drawing out what I want to manifest is that even if it's just stick figures and scribbles and sketches, the act of drawing it out allows it to manifest into my life even faster. And so I encourage you to take the time to do that. And then what I want you to do is, over the next couple of weeks, consciously spend time with these ideas, this thing that you want to manifest. Consciously spend time pretending in your own head or making believe that you've already manifested that outcome in your life. Okay? So go inside mentally and act as if and imagine what it will be like to have and experience the manifestation of whatever intention it is that you're wanting to set tonight. Okay? So I'm going to recap these prompts real quick, and then we'll have a look at what the Moon Gazing Journal has to say for tonight, and then we'll set our intentions. I'm going to get this open. I'm thinking that there's one of these that I read to you already. Not that one, that's for sure. Ha, that'll be a fun one. Yep. We're all caught up in current. Okay, so to recap the prompts. Now, keeping in mind acts of faith, leaps of faith, willingness to act in pursuit of our ambitions and aspirations. How can you reconnect with your unconscious desires for attention, for validation, for self-expression? How can you lead them out into the open for healthy expression? How can you give them light? What needs to change in your life for you to feel safe doing this? And what I mean by that is, what kind of permanent structural foundational change, right? Because the change is clear, according to the chart, that it needs to take place in the home, in the most withdrawn point from social life, from public life. It's clear from the chart that the change needs to take place within the family unit or the family dynamic, right? And so where that change needs to be foundational or structural as the underpinning of everything, as the underpinning that all of the rest of the framework of your life is built on, that's what I want you to focus on. What kind of permanent structural foundational change needs to be made in your life so that as you seek to give your unconscious needs and desires conscious expression, you can feel safe doing that on an ongoing basis, right? So I'm not just talking about what minor thing needs to change for you to feel comfortable expressing unconscious desires and unconscious needs in the next week or 2 weeks or the next month, and then not have the opportunity to feel safe doing that again. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about short-term Band-Aid solutions. That's not what you need to be focused on right now. You need to be focused on the solutions that will provide you with permanent long-term fixes for you to be able to address your needs in a healthy way, to address your unconscious desires, your unconscious motivations consciously in a healthy way. What needs to change in your life for you to feel safe to do that going forward? That's what you want to focus on. Okay? What creative risk can you take in the house that Leo falls in? What creative risk can you take in your career and professional life? What creative risk can you take in your spiritual life? That encourages you to step into your courage, to take a leap of faith. Where is it that you need to do that? How can you be brave about facing your unconscious needs, drives, and desires? Okay? Consider also, what are you passionate about in private that you hesitate to bring out into the open and share? What is your will? What experience do you want to create for yourself? And what physical thing is it that you want to create or give birth to? What thing in your professional life or your career do you want to create and give birth to? And what needs to change in the underpinnings of your life in order to set up the foundation that will allow you to pursue that and make it happen? Okay? How will you step into leadership behind the scenes? How will you take the lead on private matters? How can you channel your creative urges and energies into solo projects during a time of social distancing? And then finally, the last prompt, what kind of attention do you want in your career and in your professional life? What avenues can you explore for greater and more meaningful professional self-expression? Okay. So those are the prompts that I have for you tonight. You're going to take a moment, to set and create inspired intentions around whatever it is you want to manifest or create for yourself in the area of your life ruled by Leo. So whatever house Leo is in, over the next 6 months. And then, like I said, spend a few minutes visualizing it, draw it out on your paper. And then over the next couple of weeks, spend time pretending, spend time making believe inside your own head, engage your imagination. And imagine what that manifestation is like for you. Okay, so in our moon gazing journal, right, the one that we always look at every time, I'm going to rearrange my windows here now that I've gone through all my notes. And I'm going to take a moment to have a look at chat comments, see if there's any questions. Okay. Looks like we're all right. So today's moon gazing thing. Cut your hair as the moon waxes if you want a full head of hair. Cut it during the waning phase if you want to thin it. I think I've heard the same thing about pruning trees and shrubs. So yeah, there you go. Cut your hair during the waxing phase if you want a full head of hair, and cut it during the new moon if you want to thin it. There you go, if your hair is too thick. All right, so everybody take a few minutes. I'm going to write down in my moon gazing journal what intentions I want to set. Everyone take a few minutes, do your writing, and then when we're done, we'll reconnect and we'll share our intention settings in the comments. Alrighty. New moon, Leo. Okay, I think I'm good. It's kind of an interesting intention setting for me. I hadn't really given it much thought before. If anyone needs more time, let me know in the comments. And if not, I'll jump in with my intention setting. So I have Gemini rising, of course. This is the third house. It has to do with travel and communication, which is kind of interesting because I am going to be seeing a bit of commuting in my near future, at least for the short term. And it looks like this particular new moon is going to set that off for me, which is fine. Kind of an interesting change, though. Huh? So here's what I wrote. I intend to find and explore new ways to connect with others within my neighborhood and within my community, which allow us to adapt to living through a pandemic. All right, so I'm thinking about this through the lens of socially distancing. I intend to cultivate these relationships for the benefit of all. And that I intend for a cooperative, harmonious, and educational experience with my newest housemate, and that our arrangements and our relationship remain both favorable and beneficial to us both. It's been kind of fun. He's a really interesting guy. We have Saturn opposite Mercury in Sinistry, which means we can talk for a really long time about lots of interesting things. I intend to be clear in my communication. Oh, wait a minute. Back up, because I don't remember if I finished reading this last bit of my intention setting around my newest housemate. I also intend that our arrangements and our relationship remain favorable and beneficial to us both. And that I intend to be clear in my communication, compassionate with my words, and open to the ideas, thoughts, and self-expression of others. And that is the intention that I am setting tonight with this new moon in Leo. Those of you who are watching live or catching the replay, if you'd like to share in the comments what it is you're setting your intentions around, I'd love to hear what you have to say about this new moon in Leo and how you would like to leverage the energy of it. It's really kind of tricky energy in some ways. And I invite you to, don't hesitate to also do this practice for your sun sign. If you tend to sometimes follow Vedic astrology or tropical astrology, do the practice also for your tropical chart or for your Vedic chart if you use, for instance, like a Lahiri Ayanamsha, because then you're going to be looking at this new moon and your intention setting through the lens of being a new moon in Virgo. And the flavor of this new moon being in Virgo will be far different than the next new moon that you and I talk about being in Virgo. Okay, because that'll happen on a different new moon. And so if you want to experience the different flavors of astrology in that way and still set intentions around them, or do, like full moon releasing practices when they don't exactly line up by sign, that's fine. Just don't mix your birth charts between systems, right? So if you're doing a tropical intention setting, use your tropical chart. If you're doing a Lahiri intention setting for a Vedic chart, use Lahiri Ayanamsha. If you're doing an intention setting or a releasing practice for the Fagan zodiac, use your Fagan Bradley chart, right? So don't go mixing them, but it's perfectly fine to explore astrology through all the different lenses that are out there to be used. And if you are so inclined, feel free to take this particular new moon in that direction as well. But I would also encourage you tap into it through this second new moon in Leo lens that we see the solar system through, using the Fagan Bradley Ayanamsha. And I personally use the Fagan Bradley Ayanamsha because it is the most astronomically accurate zodiac that we have extant, and my focus is a lot about astronomical accuracy. There are many, many, many sidereal Ayanamshas, and that's because as our ability to observe planetary motion and position and measure planetary positions has become more accurate through more sophisticated equipment and measuring devices that we've developed, as our own technology has advanced as humans, we've gone from observing planetary movement from the naked eye to using these fantastic, huge telescopes in all sorts of beautiful places in the world. And so we've been able to refine our calculations and able to refine our measurements and where we place the stars against the backdrop of the sky. And that is why I use the Fagan Ayanamsha, because it is the most astronomically, not astrologically, astronomically accurate zodiac that we have available to us. And so I invite you to explore it for those reasons. I don't really have a lot of announcements for you other than, like we talked about in part 2, some of the upcoming broadcasts may be pre-recorded. Definitely the Sidereal Insights Astro Updates will be pre-recorded because those normally take place at 1:30 my time on Mondays, and I will be busy for the next 6 to 8 weeks at 1:30 my time on Mondays. I won't be available, but I still want to be able to offer you analysis of current and upcoming transits and just some advice and some strategies for how you can navigate those. Also, please stay tuned. I am behind schedule on the 2021 Ultimate Astrological Planner, but stay tuned because that will be available shortly. I hope to have things ready for pre-sale soon. We'll kind of see how that goes because my schedule will be changing as early as Monday next week. It's election season. Election season gets crazy around these parts. What else? I think that's pretty much it. Thank you all so much for joining me, whether you're joining me live or catching the replay. I want to invite you, before we go, if you are new to the broadcast, subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell, and that way you'll get notified whenever I go live or whenever I upload a new video, because sometimes, even though I also intend to go live on Facebook and upload things to Facebook, sometimes I run into technical difficulties. And so if you're not on my email list, subscribing to the YouTube channel is probably the next best place to always get notified when a video gets uploaded or when I go live. Okay. And yes, you can follow Mystic Physic Astrology on Facebook. I do have a Facebook page and I do post there. And then there's also on Facebook the Sidereal Insights Astrology community. You can join us in that group for discussion, for questions. I'm around to answer questions. It's not super active, but if y'all want to jump in and make it active, that's fine with me. I enjoy when good discussion gets going on in that group and when y'all have questions and resources to share as well. But thanks everyone for joining me tonight, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.